Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Batwoman, the latest episode of Supergirl, as well as the latest episode of Watchmen. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start to talk about each of respective shows. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Batwoman, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Supergirl, and or skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Watchmen. But the first thing I want to talk about is this week's episode of Batwoman. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I like this being a little bit of a bit in the episode. Is the fact is that every time Kate uses one of the staff, she breaks it in half. He's like, Luke's like, you think I wouldn't notice that? She's like, sorry, but it's like they should just come and break apart easily. And he's like, or like the very least, they should like break apart and still be functional as a staff. And he's like, well, yeah, they could do that, but they don't. Which I immediately think of because, like, you know, like I brought up last episode, is interesting because the way they basically set it up seems like Bruce is the only Bat person in the Bat family that was active. Like Robin, none of the Robins nor Batgirl exist in this continuity. So obviously the staff thing is, I know it's a Nightwing thing, but I think it stems from it being a Robin thing too, which is interesting timing, that old conversation, considering, like, you know, the season finale of Titans, like, was the birth of, you know, Nightwing and everything. So I just think that's just kind of interesting timing and stuff like that. But I just thought that was a nice little wink and nod, because I think Nightwing's the only one who does the whole staff thing. I don't know if anyone else in the Bat family does that, but I just thought that was kind of interesting. But regardless, obviously this whole situation is furthering of Alice's twisted plan, because obviously there's like this celebration for Catherine, like a humanitarian award type of thing, and obviously Mary wants Kate to go, but Kate doesn't want to go because it's like, your mom, everything that she's done towards me and my family, like, how can you really ask me to do that? But then Mary drops the news, like, but Dad's going. It's like, wait, Dad is? Which obviously, you know, Kate goes to visit her dad and it's like, really, you what? But he's like, oh, when you have so much history, they kind of throw that away. The fact of the matter is, me and her have spent some time together and everything. Obviously Kate's getting pissed because it's like, after everything, you're gonna forgive her, and you know what she did to our family, what she did to us, what she did to Alice, you know, well, Beth, you know. So I thought that was, you know, but then it quickly correlates in, you know, Kate's head of like, it doesn't make any sense. He's not acting like himself unless he's not himself, he's someone else. So she pieces it together, it's Mouse, and tests him to kind of see if it is Mouse, and totally figures it out that it is him. So the whole question to me goes like, because obviously she visited Alice. She's had multiple occasions to take down Alice. She's had Alice in her custody multiple times. She's been face to face with her, not even as Batwoman, as herself. But she never pulls the trigger because for her, she, you know, she even says at the beginning, I'm like, I hate to say this, Bruce, but I'm a bit of an optimist, because the fact that I think it's kind of interesting. I guess you could almost borderline that, because I guess like Kate's kind of seeing the best in her sister, whereas like maybe Bruce wouldn't. I don't know. I mean, that might have been a hard lesson that Bruce had to learn, trying to see the best in people, and that ended up potentially costing him something later on down the road, you know. So, which is just kind of a nice theme to kind of fit with the episode, but you know, she still believed it's like, oh, you kept this photo of us, so it's like Beth is still there somewhere inside. But then it's like she has your dad, which she tried to tell Sophie about it, but it was too late. They already got darted, which her and Tyler were having that whole conversation about, like, what about you and Kate? Like, that's still kind of rearing its ugly head, even though Sophie kind of made a point last episode to kind of be like, no, like, kind of like, oh, I choose you, but Tyler wasn't 100% feeling it, because he's like, yeah, but there's still some unanswered stuff about our situation, and you could tell that Sophie, because it almost seems like Sophie's very reactionary in this whole circumstances, you know. So it's like, okay, we got a lot to figure out. They were tied together, and it's like, okay, like, the fact of the matter is, tell me the truth about you and Kate. Like, no more like half-truths or whatever, trying to make it seem like it's nothing, which is like, for her, and she says this line I thought was kind of interesting. For her, she's always followed the rules, like whether it be the military's rules, whether it be her mom's, or rather her family's rules, the whole, like, you know, her sexuality situation. But the one time she broke the rule, it nearly cost her everything, like being with Kay, like kind of almost letting her guard down and not keeping her guard up about that situation. They got caught together and everything, and it nearly cost her everything that was important to her, you know, because this means everything to her, because it means so much for her family, you know. So it nearly cost her so much, and it's like, I think that's kind of, that for her is why she pushes the whole Kate situation away, because she doesn't want to admit the fact is that she does still love Kate, that despite all this time apart, despite everything, you know, breaking up with her because of her dad's suggestion, And I think for her, you can make the argument it's like maybe it was easier than facing the hardship they would have, because it's like Kate has the freedom to kind of live her life however she wants to, but like, you know, Sophie felt like she didn't have that freedom. Like, you know, she had to look after her family and take care of them, and like Kate came from a well-off enough family that their future wasn't dictated by her future, you know. So that Sophie was kind of in a tough spot in that situation. So, but still kind of dealing with all of that, and it's like, I don't know, this is actually like a very sad episode all around, just kind of like there was no winner in all of this. Everything that was kind of set up, you know, Catherine, and I figured like this was going to be that type of situation of like someone getting poisoned. I was hoping that when it was all said and done, someone would be able to make it out of this okay, because obviously like there's a whole situation with Jacob having a conversation with Beth, and it's like he admits his fault. The fact of the matter is I didn't test it. I should have got the, you know, the bones tested myself, but he didn't want to because it was easier to accept that she was gone rather than, you know, keep hope alive, because hope, you know, in some instances, and it's a messed up thing to say, but for some people it's like hope is worse than despair, because hope, you get your hopes up, and when you crash down from that hope, you know, when that sadness and despair sinks in, it crushes you so much harder than, you know, like accepting that she was gone was a hard fact, but for him, he was doing it not only for himself, but he was doing it for Kate as well, which even Catherine was like, yeah, she saw how dedicated Kate was, how much this was, you know, sucking both her and Jacob in, and just seeing how heartbroken she was. And it's like, for her, it's like, I saw, you know, Mary when I looked at Kate, and it's like, you know, my motherly instincts kicked in of like, I wanted to protect them from this pain, so I did something. Not even not a little white lie, a major big white lie that shifted everything. It's led up to this moment, you know, and that's the sad situation. Because despite everything that he's done, you know, Jacob apologizing everything and being like, it's my fault, I shouldn't have given up so easily and stuff like that. But even then, it wasn't enough for her, because it can't satiate that anger she's built up over this decade plus. Like that type of anger, that deep-seated anger since she was a kid, you can't fix that. Like she's broken on the inside, and that's the thing, who knows if she can be fixed. I mean, especially with everything that goes down this episode. I'm skipping around a lot, but you know, that whole moment between Mary and Catherine of like, you know, even getting Catherine to kind of talk about, you know, the fact is, oh, we sell our weapons to criminals and stuff like that, which I'm like, wow, especially because I think they do probably like a lot of military contracts. So the fact is, like, the poison she's dying from, it's actually a poison that her company made, and it's like, oh, there's actually a cure for it. Oh, actually there's not a cure, because they created this very deadly poison and didn't bother making a cure for it because they didn't want there to be a cure for it. And then I was like, oh, look, it's kind of ultimately going to be your undoing. So basically I'm trying to suggest that, like, oh, her company and her aren't that squeaky clean, because not just aside from all they've done to me, they've done shady stuff because they've created these weapons of mass destruction and stuff like that. Because let's not also forget, they were literally designing a weapon that was going to kill her sister. Granted, Catherine didn't know it was Kate underneath the bat suit, but still, it's like that was intentionally, you know, you were going to kill my sister. So it's not like, you know, and now all the people that could reproduce the piece needed to make that weapon possible at killing Batwoman no longer, you know, in her own twisted mind, Alice is almost like, you should thank me because I kind of did you a favor, sis, that whole situation. So, and much like the situation with Jacob, even when Catherine heavily apologized, it still wasn't enough. I mean, Alice is still playing her games because she's like, oh, here's a cure, but there's only enough for the two of you, or for one of you. So it's like, so what are you going to do, Catherine? Are you going to take it yourself, or are you going to give it to Mary? Because there's not enough for the both of you. And for her, it's like, you know, because even Alice in her own deranged mind, you know, I think in her mind, she still feels that she's justified, because she's like, do you think I want to do this to you, Mary? I was a daughter that lost her mother too. It's like, she specifically is like, I remember seeing my mom's decapitated head floating down the river after our car crash. So why would I want to put someone through all that? To be fair, you know, for her, it's like, this is to prove a point that your actions have consequences. That basically, once again, your mother did everything to herself. Like, the fact of the matter is, if she hadn't done what she did all those years ago, we wouldn't be where we are right now. You know, and it's sad, you know? Her mom pushing her to take the cure, which, you know, Mary's like, come on, mom, just hang on. we'll, get you some help or something. And, Catherine admitting she already knew about Mary's little clinic and everything. It's like, why didn't you say anything? It's like, well, what's the fastest way to get you to stop doing something is by having my approval. So she was proud of what Mary was doing. So, that's kind of a nice little thing kind of to go out on. It's like Catherine did a very villainous thing. Yes, she was connected to a company that did some not so good stuff in certain regards. I mean, I'm sure the same thing can be said about Wayne Enterprise. I mean, depends on what continuity you go by, because if you look at certain continuities, Thomas and Martha weren't saints themselves. Like I said, it depends on the continuity. I don't think that's something that's always across the board, but obviously, Wayne Enterprises has always kind of been, obviously they're connected to weaponry and stuff like that, much kind of like Stark Industries in the MCU, well, in Marvel in general, but specifically in the MCU, how Tony wanted to shift what it was originally about and everything. So I think it's that kind of similar, in a very, very similar vein in that regard. So, but it's like, did she deserve this? No, she made a mistake. Yes, it was a big mistake. But what this comes down to is like, once again, like just Alice's can't forgive. I mean, to be fair, her life was turned upside down, holding on to this hatred of like, wait, my family never found me, hating them for that, plus knowing that I wonder how did she ever find out that Catherine did that? Well, I guess maybe she looked up the records, or maybe home dude that she was staying with, the dude that was Mouse's dad, maybe he ended up being like, oh, they're not going to look for you because they think you're dead. This is why they found this. And it's like she probably pieced two and two together, be like, oh, Catherine said that. Or maybe she hacked into some of like the Hamilton files and stuff like that and found out that, maybe she actually tracked down the people who said it was her body and killed them, but only after finding out it was Catherine who paid them off, type of thing. I'm thinking that might be the case. I don't know if that's something they've specifically referenced, of like how Alice knows Catherine was behind all that, but regardless, it's still sucky. I think for, Alice, it's meant to, cause turmoil in, the family, kind of, ruin Mary, because like it's supposed to be like, oh, you ruined me now because of these circumstances. Your daughter is broken like me. And obviously Kate blames herself, because it's like she even starts choking Alice at one point in time, because it's like, but she can't bring herself to do it because it's like, you're still my sister. There's still that connection and everything. But it's like her entire family's imploded because now Jacob's left holding the bag. Like GCPD's arrested him because they think he's the one behind Catherine's murder. Obviously Mary knows the truth, but she's so grief stricken right now that, she doesn't want to have anything to do with Kate or probably Jacob right now, because she's too, caught up in losing her mom. Because it's like, my mom, she was complicated, she made mistakes, but the fact is she was willing to sacrifice her own life for me shows that she's not the monster that you and your sister made her out to be. And the fact is, Kate wants to be there to comfort her, but it's like, you're literally the last person I want to comfort me right now. So it's like, it's so sad, because her and Mary were kind of rebuilding that bridge between them, and now that bridge is gapped even bigger, because now it's like, for her, it's like everything in her life is upheavaled. And and Alice is talking about, oh, you'll join my side. It's like, after what you've done, like, I think things are actually going down a completely different angle, because I think in her own mind she thinks like, oh, when it's all said and done, get rid of all of this, Kate will be by my side. It's like, I don't think it's going to work the way you think it is. Like, but maybe for her, she thinks like, oh, I'm going to push Kate in this direction, but eventually it'll kind of balance itself out, and she'll realize that I did everything for her and us. But it's like, for Kate, she's dead set on getting revenge. It's like, because Jacob's like, the moment I get out of here, I'm putting her down, and Kate's like, I won't stop you, so it's like, that's rough, dude. That I don't know. It's heartbreaking to have things kind of end up this way, and just like to have, I don't know. It's interesting to know that this is the storyline we're going into Crisis with too. Like, that means Kate's going to have a lot on her mind, on her plate. I mean, to be fair, it's kind of, and that's the beauty of these crossovers. It's not just a thing of like, oh, what goes out in the crossovers do matter, because it does carry back over into the show before, like what happens before goes into the, it helps build up the storylines during the events of the crossovers, but also the aftermath of it too. Like, because, a great, everyone had their issues going into the Elseworlds crossover, for example, and definitely a lot of those issues were resolved by the end of it, going into the future episodes of the respective shows, Supergirl, Flash, and, Arrow. But regardless, this is heavy thing to be kind of carrying, you know. And I think we'll probably get some insight into like where things kind of stand for Kate. We probably won't get full focus on it, but we'll probably get a little bit of talk about it probably during Crisis on Infinite Earths. But another interesting thing is obviously once again the Tyler and Sophie situation, because it's like, all right, do you love me? And she's like, yes. Are you in love with me? And she's like, I don't know. And so for him it's like, because he talks about the fact is what he wants. It's like he wants kids. He he wants that, basically that, American dream type of situation, white picket fence type of thing. That's kind of the vibe I get. And for him, it's like, I just want to make sure I'm not investing my time in something that doesn't matter. Because for him, it's like, if you don't feel this way, I want you to tell me up front rather than waste, like, our time be wasted going down this route. Because he doesn't want her to be like, I don't want you to have to kind of go with the flow of this relationship. I want you to be here because this is where you want to be. But obviously for Sophie, she's got a lot to figure out, which she was like, hey, maybe while you're thinking that over, maybe I'll be here and we can pick things up, or maybe I'll be gone, who knows. So literally everyone's life is literally imploding right now, especially Kate. So I'm curious to see where she goes from here, because obviously Kate is going to be dead set on going up against and I think that's going to be an interesting thing for her, because she's going to be so probably blinded by revenge and the need to take Alice down, because still calls, because I think no matter what, that aspect of her being her sister is still, because the thing is, what makes it worse is like she kept defending her by being like, oh, the fact of the matter is like my dad forgiving Catherine is one thing, he made a choice. Beth didn't make a choice to become Alice, it was just everything she went through, which is like, yeah, that's true, but even as at this point in time, despite everything she's done, she has made her choices and she has to be held responsible for them. And I think that's going to be a heavy burden for Kate to kind of have to bear, because it's not only because it's your burden to bear, because it's like you don't want, because it's Alice's burden to bear that like you killed someone like this, you took Mary's mom from her. But it's on Kate to carry that, because once again she had multiple chances to take Alice down, but her need and want to save her sister costs innocent people their lives, and Catherine might not have been your favorite person, but you feel bad because she didn't deserve this and Mary didn't deserve that, so, and now she can't be there for the person who is her family, her sister. She was so dedicated in saving her old family, her sister, that she let her new family fall to the wayside, and it cost her everything, So whether she'll be able to piece things together, it's going to be interesting. Obviously, like I said, the whole setup for Crisis, neat little teaser at the end, kind of what they kind of did similar to Elseworlds. I'm curious, is it going to be the same thing? Because Elseworlds kind of worked the same way, where it was like the same at the end of each show. But obviously with Nash opening up that door, because obviously he's come here specifically to kill the Monitor, which I'm interested to kind of dive into that more, and he gets sucked up somewhere. So it is going to be interesting to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into Crisis. If you're unaware of the schedule, next week we'll get parts 1, 2, and 3. Part 1 will be on Sunday with Supergirl. Part 2 will be Monday with Batwoman, and then part the 9th. Sorry, and part 3 will be on The Flash, which will be on the 10th. So just kind of laying it out there. So I am very interested to see where this takes us going into Crisis, but also just going forward with Batwoman in general. It's definitely taking a very interesting turn. So. And now moving on to this week's episode of Supergirl. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. It's so neat. I like the parallels that they're kind of setting up on the different DC shows that are on the same night. For example, like I kept bringing up the comparisons between Flash and Arrow, like Barry and Oliver's stories are kind of parallels to each other, and it seems like Kate and Kara's stories are kind of in the same regard, just because like what Kara's going through with Lena is literally what Kate is going through with Alice, and it's kind of an interesting parallel, and I think that's such a fascinating thing that they're kind of setting up. But obviously, everyone's kind of being informed about Lena's been behind all of, well, the fact of the matter is she took Myriad. She's known about Kara's secret identity for months now, not, prior to Kara telling her and everything. So now it's a whole thing of like, okay, so how do we approach from here? John shows up with Malefic, and it's like, oh, we know, this is what Lena did. She had me captured this entire time, learning to use my Q waves to kind of, working with Myriad can mind control people. And it's like, obviously Kara being who she is, and Kara has always willing to see the best in people, especially because for Lena, it's like Lena's her best friend, and it's like she sees how much effort Lena's always put in to try and separate herself from her family name. Of like, she isn't a Luther, she's our own person, she's a good person, so she's trying to preach that. Well, obviously, Alex has got a complicated situation for her, because it's a thing of like, so Lena's a friend of hers too, but it's like, the thing is, are you willing to put one person's life above so many other lives? Like, they've had to deal with Myriad in the past, and they saw what that became. And so it's a whole thing of, it's also that thing of like, how can you really say that she's, no matter what she's planning to do, use Myriad for, you're imposing your will on someone. It doesn't matter if you have the best intentions, you're forcing people against their will to fit some mold you want them to fit. Like, what about the whole freedom of humanity? But to be fair, in Lena's mind, it's probably like, humans have that freedom and they squandered it, which is interesting, because you can obviously set up parallels between Lena's thought process and Romacon's. Obviously, they have very different perspectives. She wants to save people by controlling them. He wants to literally wipe everyone else out because humans have failed this earth and everything. So it's just interesting that there's parallels in that regard as well, And I thought it was so interesting that Alex brought up some really, really good points against Lena. Because for her, it's not just this. Lena's it's like, oh, like Lena, you're saying that Lena's not a Luther, but then who is she? Because the fact of the matter is, what does she do? Oh, she was able to make kryptonite, and she never told you about it. Obviously, we know that caused a big issue between Supergirl and Lena, hence which made her lean on Kara more. Which obviously made Kara feel bad, but at the same time, it's like, at least I still get to keep my friendship with my friend. That whole complicated mess. Obviously, they kind of repaired that for it just to end up blowing up in her face even more in that regard. There's a whole situation with Sam. It's like, oh, she knew Sam was Rain, and she kept her down there, never informed us of that. So it's the whole thing of like, Lena has kept secrets. It's not just, this isn't the newest thing, but obviously in Kara's mind is like, but I kept secrets from her for so long. But for Alex, it's like, yeah, but it's not you kept it for malicious reasons. It's not like, oh, you didn't trust Lena. It's like, no, you kept your identity for the purpose of protecting the people around you, to keep us safe. So, but Lena's not seeing it that way, because you could also make the arguments like, well, why does everyone else around you get to know? Well, they're kind of, when you're dealing with someone that you care about that's not neck deep in this whole situation. Alex, I mean, for one, that's your sister. She's obviously going to be the first one to figure out, because she saw you there. She's seen you become Supergirl, which is interesting to say, because you've been basically Supergirl in your entire life. You've been on Earth, but regardless. But she saw that when Jimmy, obviously, to be fair, Brainy's situation is a little different. John's situation is a little different. But then the thing is that Nia is also like half alien, plus she's a hero too. So it's a little bit different, but it's just like, that was just, I don't know. You could probably potentially see an argument in that whole situation, but obviously the whole approach is like, well, obviously Alex is like, I have to do what's right. If we can't get Lena to kind of back down, we will send down that Claymore satellite to destroy her, to make sure that Myriad isn't activated. But obviously Kara's like, no, we can find another way, which obviously there's the whole thing with Malefic, who's trying to make up for his past crimes because he was so driven by, revenge and stuff like that, which obviously you can find a parallel between Malefic and Lena in that same regard of like, you were so filled with anger and pain, you had to lash out. But the difference between Lena and Kara's situation is that you have a psychic connection between Malefic and John, that they were able to kind of reach each other on a deeper level than like, Lena and Kara could. Because even Kara tried to reach out to Lena with that hologram and everything, being like, the fact of the matter is, your brother did that as a last minute move to make you like him. If you do this, it doesn't matter if you have the best of intentions. The fact is, you go down this route, you won't be able to come back from it. You will become like your brother. But for her, it's like, I'm not the villain. She's like, I'm the good guy in this situation. And then obviously it makes things matters worse, because Alex had planted a virus in the hologram, and obviously Lena thinks it was Kara. It's like, oh, of course, I'm stupid enough to believe. And she referred to her as Supergirl. Didn't even call her Kara. Even, now that it's all out in the open and everything, she still refers to her as Supergirl, because I guess for her it's like, because Supergirl was the facade, like Kara was the mask, Supergirl is who you really are, and you were deceiving me and lying to me the entire time. I think that's kind of how I'm viewing that situation. But now it's like, that makes Lena even more distrustful. Maybe even if her words were even if Kara's words were kind of getting to Lena even a little bit, that definitely got undone because of Alex's actions. But at the same time, it's like, for her, it's like, John, you put me in this position to make hard choices. So, like, I care about Lena, but what about the rest of the world? Like, but, you know, because of this situation with Malefic, it made John realize, like, if there was another way for us, there's another way in this, and, you know, they'll find it. And they end up figuring out, it's like, well, we can counter Lena's Q waves that she's using for Myriad with Malefic's. But then it turns into the situation of Alex doesn't want to do that because she doesn't trust Malefic, you know, especially everything that he's done to them, especially to Kelly. It makes it hard to trust him. But while all this is going down, Ramakan's doing his thing of, like, trying to create a modern day Pompeii, because it's like, oh, these humans have screwed up so much. He's also doing this because he's trying to prove himself, because it's like, oh, like, the head honcho of Leviathan, which I'm guessing her they kept referring to, their boss, essentially, I'm guessing she's Leviathan. Maybe not. I'm assuming so, but regardless, it's kind of potentially throwing out there, like, oh, maybe someone else will take over the leadership. Because it seems like Romakan hasn't been running the ship the entire time. It seems like, which is funny, you know, words, considering the fact is it is a, you know, ship situation, because they crashed here on, oh, it was an asteroid, but it was actually a ship. Regardless, I'm going on a tangent, but I think it's interesting. The fact is that, you know, for him, he's only been running this, like, being the head honcho for this whole situation for only, like, the past 200 years. So, but he's desperate to kind of prove himself, and it's like, oh, how powerful and mighty he is. So he's trying to create another Pompeii. He needs the medallion that Andrea had, but obviously Lena has that. But then there's the whole situation of, well, he decides he can just use her, because even without the coin, she still has that power inside of her. So she's the next best thing as a battery. And it's kind of like, okay, like, the fact of the matter is, you do what I ask you to do, and I'll let you go. Your dad will be able to keep his riches and whatnot. You know, for her, it's more so than anything, because Andrea has already lost so much. She lost the man that she loved, even, you know, through her attempts to try and save him and everything, that was kind of all undone and taken from her. And now there's a whole situation of, you know, now she was forced in this situation, but then she backed down because she was like, no, I'm not going to be a part of something that's going to lead to all these different people. Because at the very least, she's like, at the very least, when you were forcing me to do stuff, at the very least, I thought, hey, there was a greater plot at play here, that we were at least doing some good, is how she justified it. But now it's like, we're talking about wiping out not just a few people, probably the entire planet, you know? So obviously she wasn't down for that. She tried to warn the DEO. Obviously, Ramakan grabbed her, and I thought it was kind of interesting, maybe because the staff is kind of draws upon that power, because for him to be able to follow her like he did, maybe like when she kind of fades into the shadows like that, maybe using his power, or maybe just using the staff in general to draw on her power, he was able to reach, because he became almost like a shadow too. It grabbed her and pulled her back. I was like, that was interesting. Maybe like being in close enough proximity, the staff got some of the power, so he was able to mimic it in that moment. Whatever the case may be, I just thought that was kind of interesting. You know, Andrea trying to do the right thing in the long run, and, you know, and once again, that's a whole thing in itself. Like, everyone in their own right is trying to do the right thing, you know, now, you know, I think it's up to Alex, because literally two catastrophes are going on at the same time. John and Kara are dealing with Romakan, and then obviously they're left dealing with the whole situation with Lena. Obviously, using the satellite will assure Myriad's destruction, but will also ensure that Lena would die. But then there's still a pretty big chance the whole Malefic situation could work out, and it would also mean that Lena would get out of it alive. So those options being weighed, and obviously the time counting down kind of put Alex in a very compromised position. Also, at the same time, Lena's like, oh, I don't need any friends. But the moment Hope is like, oh, no, I'll go out there and fix the satellite and everything. But it's like, no, you'll die. The fact of the matter is, I could use you. It's like, no, you had this whole speech about how you don't need friends or whatever, but Hope is, you know, because of everything that's going on, you were so desperate to hold on to whoever you can trust. And in her mind, it's like, Hope will never abandon me or hurt me like a human would, because, you know, because Hope, you know, it's, and that's almost kind of the messed up thing when you actually think about it from an AI perspective of like, well, you programmed her to feel that way. It's like, is that how she genuinely feels? Maybe because her AI is kind of adapted. We might be going on some like Emergence level type of situation, kind of referencing Piper. If you haven't watched Emergence, you should watch Emergence. It's a really good show. But it kind of deals in the same regard, and I'm kind of spoiling Emergence if you haven't been watching Emergence. But regardless, Nautilus is kind of that type of thing, but it's just kind of like, don't you find it a little hypocritical? It's like, it's basically you program someone to basically reflect what you believe. You're not trying to get a different opinion. You don't want to be talked out of this. You want to go full throttle with it, or full throttle. But I don't know. It's just kind of interesting when you think about it like that. But for her, it's like, no. I believe the fact of the matter is that humans are terrible and they need to be basically put in line of like, so they stop hurting each other. So once again, that misguided, like I said, you can understand where Lena's coming from of like why she's doing what she's doing. Much like the whole Alice situation. Don't mean you agree with it. Granted, Lena's situation is very different from Alice's situation, but obviously, once again, there's still a parallel there. And the thing is, you're doing something because you're lashing out because you're in so much pain, and obviously there's going to be consequences to it. So, Hope ends up activate the satellite, turning it, but luckily the Q waves and a combination of Malefic helping them and them turning off the psychic blockers, making it so that he had his full power, was able to fight back their Q waves, kind of undoing their plan, which is interesting in the long run because once again, spoilers for Batwoman, but obviously I had a whole spoiler conversation about it, but like Alice killing Catherine, obviously Lena hasn't killed anyone yet. Well, that's not 100% true because she did in fact kill I'm blanking, Lex. So, well, quote unquote killed Lex. So it's just interesting, and I'm curious, like, when it's all said, well, I'll get to that later. But, it's interesting, like, it's like, well, Alex has crossed the line that it's like, hey, maybe she can't be saved, but Lena's crossed the line, but maybe there's still hope for saving her. Kara's willing to do it, and so is, Alex, so I think that's kind of interesting. Whereas like on the opposite side of things with like Batwoman, Kate and Jacob are kind of at the point where they're like, after what's happened, they're basically their entire family imploding. They're not willing to give Alice a second chance, or Beth. They're kind of ready to put her down. So very different, similar parallels, but obviously very different outcomes to a certain extent. That depends on what happens to Lena, because I think, once again, Lena in her desperate need to do what she believes is good, because she's like, yeah, the good guys don't win. It's like, yeah, while you were all focused on doing that, Leviathan was off doing some damage that you weren't aware of. So it's kind of like, it's so interesting that you're like the good guy. Yeah, you don't see it. She doesn't see how misguided she is. Like, I get it. You are hurt. They hurt you. That's understandable, but at the same time, it doesn't justify you doing what you're doing. So it's a whole complicated mess, So, but luckily they were able to stop Lena. Obviously, Kara and John were able to stop Romacon. Obviously, Andrea, or rather, Shadow she dealt the final blow, but she didn't kill him. I thought it was kind of interesting how Kara ended up like knocking him into the tar, because for him it's like, oh, I've been here so long, and the fact of the matter is he's seen the ugly side of humanity. Like I said, like kind of like Lena, like I said, he just has a different approach to it. It's kind of like, rather than trying to fix humanity, why not just destroy them? That way, that's how you get your clean slate. But for Kara, she talks about that being the beauty of humanity, and that's even something John had talked about. The fact of the matter is, like, people can be better if we give them the opportunity to, which obviously draws us back to the whole, or Kate and Jacob willing to give Alice another chance to be better. Might be too far going for that, especially because they give her time, chance and chance again. But still, and it's like, and for, Kara made that point of like, humans have the ability to grow and change. The fact of the matter is they're not stuck in their ways. That's the beauty of humanity, that they can change for good, so that humanity isn't completely hopeless. That's why she believes in humans. That's why she believes so much in Lena, because she's known Lena, and it's despite everything, she knows what's in Lena's heart. So she knows that even if Lena's changed down this path, that she's not going completely. And even at the end, we see that there's still some part of Kara that is tugging at her heart, So I just thought that was kind of interesting. It was interesting, the FBI showing up and everything, but Eve is taking the blame for it, which you kind of feel bad for Eve because it's like, yeah, all this talk about doing good, but you're hijacking Eve. Yeah, Eve's not the best person, but still, it's just kind of a little, I don't know, a little messed up that you're hijacking her body without her permission and everything. So that's where it kind of gets, once again, the whole thing of like freedom, but it's like, hey, you had freedom and look what you've done. All you've done is hurt. And it's just like, because at the end of the day, it's like Lena's reasons, she has her reasons. They might seem justified, they might seem good, but at the end of the day, they are selfish reasons. Like, you're saying this is for the betterment of the world. It's just to ease your own pain. So it's like, you know, I think she's not even willing to even think that maybe there'll be some harm to the world in general from her actions. But, you know, you'll kind of see. Obviously, kind of tying that all up is the whole situation of the lady kind of pulling the, you know, leadership role from Romacon. So it's like, for her, it's like, yeah, I'm going to handle things my way going forward. So that's definitely interesting. Romacon isn't dead. He's just, you know, out of commission, at least for now. So we'll see. Obviously, the other members of Leviathan aren't, you know, I'm sure we're going to slowly but surely kind of learn more about them over the course of the season. There's everything with Andrea. She tried to do the right thing, but it took her so long to do it. And one of her reasons for doing it was Russell. And it kind of, in the end, it doesn't matter because it's like, it looked too little too late. She's in the little lenses kind of reliving the memories of her and Russell. And it's just like, it sucks that things kind of played out that way. So I'm curious to see what that means going forward. Or is Leviathan going to draw her back in? Or they're just kind of letting her go for now, which obviously this could lead to her teaming up with Supergirl, which is going to be interesting to see what that means storyline-wise when we kind of tie Andrea to being a shadow and what that means for Kara and William. That's going to be an interesting aspect to that. And then another element I thought was kind of pretty neat is obviously Malefic still trying to make up for everything. And John's like, if you want to, I'm going to introduce you to someone referencing Magan and everything that's going down on Mars. And it's like, for Malefic, it's like, this is an opportunity to fix what I started all those years ago. But it's like, how do I know that, you know, I won't kind of screw up again or, you know, make matters worse. But the fact of the matter is, because for him, it's like, I'm not as strong as you, brother, but, you know, John believes Malefic can make this change because it's like, we treated you as like you were like this abomination, that you were going to be this problem, when in actuality you might be the solution, because you being a green Martian, plus you being kind of almost the outsider, plus you were working with the white Martians all those years ago. So maybe you can be that bridge to kind of change everything, you know? So I thought that was kind of neat. And obviously, you know, Malefic goes to Mars, but then lo and behold, who shows up? The Monitor. Once again, it's like, with everything that's going down in Arrow kind of showing that maybe he's not the bad guy, but then everything with Nash and Barry, going down into Flash is kind of making him out to be a villain, because Arrow made him seem like a villain at one point in time, but now it's like, oh, maybe he's not. This is once again further test, because it's like, oh, because you like, I like that they did bring that back, because it's like, why did he do that? Was that just? But it's like, no, he's like, I saw you during Elseworlds, you showed yourself to be a good champion, but there was something holding you back. You thought it was something, I forgot what was it he was referencing, but he says it's obviously you didn't know at the time, but it was everything connected to your brother. So that could have been your weakness. And so I wanted to put you through this trial to face your weakness, that your weakness became your strength. You know, so that's what this is all about. And it's like, he's like, so why did you do all this? Prepare me for what? The crisis. I'm like, dude, the tests never end. Obviously, like, we haven't gotten to it yet, but obviously there's going to be more tests potentially for Barry. Let's see how that whole situation ends up, obviously playing into Crisis, and obviously where Oliver currently stands, because there was a lesson that Lila kind of had to play a role in teaching him last week. So that's a lot of interesting elements. So a lot of stuff to kind of take into consideration. Obviously, there's the big thing at the end that, like, oh, our big tie into the Crisis event is that Lex isn't dead. The Monitor brought him back to life, because it's like, even though him being the evil guy that he is, the fact of the matter is, it's like, you can finally become the hero you've always wanted to be, because we're going to need a mind like yours during the Crisis. And he's like, I've always been the good guy. And which for him, it's like, which even the Monitor's kind of looking like, yeah, sure, whatever you want to say, dude. And obviously, you know, which I'm wondering, does that mean Lex might go through some, like, story arcs, like the fact there's some growth potentially during this Crisis event? I don't know. But And it's like, oh, we're also going to have to talk about Lena, which is like, okay, so this is probably not just going to be stuff leading into the crisis. It's probably leading up to stuff outside of crisis at the end of it, whatever it ends up being. But the thing is he going to try and get back at Lena because she killed him? It's like, oh, I've set her down this path, and now, or he's trying to say like, oh, Lena might be a threat because of the villain she might potentially grow into. I have no idea. I'm so excited to see where all this ends up taking us, not only going into the crisis event, but also seeing where all this will land, taking us going forward with Supergirl in general. And now moving on to this week's episode of Watchmen, another great episode. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. It is kind of interesting. I do like that perspective of us, because I feel like we never got this perspective, in the original. Well, once again, this is just based off the movie because I'm not that familiar with the comic book, but it's a whole aspect of like, Dr. Manhattan, how he's viewed in Vietnam, because obviously in his continuity, it's like in this world, Vietnam became the 51st state. And that's such an interesting thing, because obviously going through the story of Dr. Manhattan and just kind of realizing like how he's seen as both a symbol of, like, he's represented and loved as a god while also being hated. I mean, because that puts like Vietnam in a very interesting position, because it's like this godlike being came and ended the war, but some people celebrate him for it, other people hate him for it. And I'm like, that's such a complicated thing of like, he is worshipped and hated in the same breath. And I think that's such an interesting aspect. I mean, to be fair, there's nothing like him in this world. He is literally the only godlike being that he is. So it's fascinating. I mean, when you actually think about it, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, you can all understand why other people would hate him too, because it's like he was part of the invasion that came into your country, and a lot of that's still there. A lot of that, because it seems like there's a lot of like American culture that's infiltrated Vietnam. I mean, it has become a 51st state, so it's like, so now it turns into a thing of like there's people who are just kind of like, everyone that's kind of here that's kind of adopted the American ways, who've kind of adopted this being the 51st state, are invaders and traitors, more so invaders, to like, I think it almost turns into those who believe in what Vietnam was before, Dr. Manhattan showed up. But it's such a fascinating thing. And all the while, there's all these other elements to it. We meet Angela when she was young. She was trying to get a movie called Sister Nun, which is interesting because obviously Sister Nun looks a lot like her, and obviously that's her hero persona present day. So it's like, okay, so you drew, and once again, the parallels, obviously, because we know that her grandfather, Will, the whole hooded justice thing, he kind of does a similar thing that she did with the whole, like, he did white, like, markings around his eyes, obviously, to make himself look white underneath the hood. But obviously she does the whole, she does black, but that was more so mirroring Sister Nun. But to be fair, maybe on some level without her realizing it, because there's a whole conversation of, genetic memory and stuff like that. Maybe on some level that was true to, I mean, especially when we kind of break everything down in Angela's story, because like obviously her dad didn't want her to watch the movie, because it's like, oh, it was someone in a mask, and it's like people who have a mask have something to hide. Because that was something I was curious about. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because I was curious, because it's like I figured as much because we got a little more insight, obviously, last episode. But I was curious at how much of that carried over, because I was like, how much do you remember? Because you were still fairly young at the time, everything that dealt with Will. But then it turns out, oh, he remembered enough, and it kind of stuck with him enough to be like, yeah, I don't want you looking at something like that. It might kind of inspire you, because like, being a hero because eventually it's like you might start off pretending to be a hero, but at what point does it stop being pretend to become real? I just thought that was a whole interesting thing. So obviously he's going to have a very different perspective on this because of his upbringing and everything, which sadly Angela's mom and dad both died in a terrorist attack, which also shows you just how like justice works, at least in this world. That like cops just showed up and like, oh, is this the guy that was responsible? Oh yeah, and they took him over there because Angela was like, no, I'm not scared. I don't have to worry about being brave. Yeah, this is totally the dude. They took him around the corner, and she was like, can I hear? I was like, oh, you want to hear, And she's so calm, cool, and collected. And you hear the guy, get shot. But what's interesting is one of the officers, she goes, here's this badge. If you kind of decided you want to go down this route, come visit me. I'm like, that's interesting. So once again, the whole thing of like, oh, it's just kind of, interestingly enough, history is kind of repeating itself. But at the same time, it's almost borderlining as a genetic memory thing of almost, it's like, it's not necessarily, well, because there was this moment I mean, because at first it feels like you could think of it as genetic memory, but it's not really genetic memory in the same regard. And obviously it got brought up during that episode that really dived into Looking Glass. But it was more so like, obviously, Angela's own memories were kind of like flipping back and forth between hers and Will's, because it was like basically she's having a major identity crisis inside of her head. So I just thought that was such an interesting element. But yeah, just to kind of have it come full circle like that, to show how she ended up being a cop. So there's that side of things. And since I brought Looking Glass up, it was interesting to find out, because I brought it up last episode because I'd forgot to bring it up during episode 5, but it was like, yeah, what about Wade's situation? And turns out Wade's actually really good. He must have seen it coming, or he knew Joe was coming. Well, his setup, he had to replace his stuff, but maybe it was secured enough, like, his warning device, but that was more so for psychic stuff. So for him to kind of know the cavalry was coming and murdered all of them, I'm like, yo, Looking Glass ain't half bad, So I guess, his whole thing is about people being able to read people. So he did what he did for Angela to keep her and her family safe, but also because he knew what Joe was doing. So it's probably like he probably made it seem like his guard was down, but he's like, he could probably read it on Joe's face that they were going to send the cavalry after him. And they're like, but I was actually surprised. I'm like, man, they are super dead. Wow. Which PD discovers all this, and even Lori was shocked, because obviously she thought, like, if he was betraying Angela, that's because he met up with the cavalry, and obviously he's inside of this, so that's why he wants to take Angela out, because she's connected all. Like, that's what she thought, but the fact is he ended up killing the cavalry makes her go, okay, so something else is going on here. And obviously Lori is playing his message, Angela's message over and over again, bringing up the Cyclops and stuff like that. And then so she goes to speak with Jane, Judd's wife, and there's some interesting conversations going on, because I was so curious. I was like, so do you know? And it's like, yeah, she now knows because of Angela. It's like she talked a lot. So we skipped through a couple things throughout the recording that Lori had, but more so than anything, she had the entire conversation. Everything that we experienced in the episode, Lori experienced too. So she knows everything that Angela learned about her grandfather, learning that he was the original Hooded Justice. And I like Lori's perspective. Even though she's got this perspective of hunting down vigilantes, she still shows respect to the legacy, because it's like, Will was Hooded Justice. Hooded Justice inspired the Minutemen, which inspired the Watchmen. That inspiration was, for my mom, and even Lori was like, for me too, like. And I was, kind of showing a sign of respect. It was like he was the first vigilante. Can you imagine, like, a white man in a mask is a hero, but a black guy in a mask is a bad guy, and then she starts talking about some stuff. I'm like, yo, the way she's breaking this down, I'm like, this is so dope, especially when she brings up, like, Joe Keene's side of things and the 7th Cavalry and this whole Cyclops thing. Because I started wondering, I was like, well, we know Judd was kind of, a white supremacist and everything, but then it kind of goes like, okay, if that's the case, she starts going down the route, then it makes you question everyone else around him. I was like, oh, his wife is definitely in on this then, if you're saying that. But then she brings up Joe, and I was like, oh, it's like, you figured that out, because she knew that Joe and Judd were good buddies. So now it turns into this whole thing, and I love her kind of breaking it down, trying to explain it all, that basically the 7th Cavalry is just the new age Cyclops. They're just kind of in a different form, and that basically the White Knight situation was Joe's way to kind of get police in mask as well. So when it's time, when everything's all said and done, basically this program of his kind of quote unquote works, and then he can eventually take up the become president, and then it's like, oh, you can never tell who's the good guys and bad guys anymore, because everyone's going to be wearing masks and they're going to be answering to Joe. I'm like, that's so interesting. I was like, wow. And she's like, okay. And Lori's like, wait, what? She's like, oh, what, was this not supposed to be the point where I'm confessing? And she's pressing buttons on the remote. I'm like, what the hell is that supposed to do? Even Lori's like, what the hell are you doing? Stop it. And then the seat jumps lower. I'm like, what the hell is that? I was almost halfway expecting like a gun or something to come out to shoot. I didn't know what to make of it. And it turns out to be a trap door underneath the couch. I'm like, that's like some like supervillain level stuff. That's not real. That's like a supervillain like stereotype of like, you fell into my trap, ha ha ha, like a twirling your mustache type of thing. Like that just seems so real. And even Lori's like, really? who puts a damn trap floor underneath their own floor? You know, I just thought that was kind of interesting. And then Joe's about to start talking. She's like, oh my God, please tell me you're not about to sit here and explain your evil plan to me. I was like, that's so interesting. And I love her getting snippy with him. And then like his explanation I thought was so interesting. Interesting in the fact is you're still pieces of shit, but you're trying to gloss it up. It's like, we're not racist. The fact is things have just kind of slid in a certain direction that he's kind of thinking like the equilibrium is kind of off. For him, it's like, it's so hard to be a white man in America. Even Lori goes, okay. Because for him, it's like he feels like obviously the world is kind of built in a manner where it's like everyone else gets advantages and you actually get penalized for being a white male. That's kind of the lane that him and the others are coming from. So, and that's such an interesting perspective to come from, you know. So, to know that's. You know, because it's so interesting trying to make it seem like, well, we're not trying to make it seem like we're not racist. I guess almost trying to make it seem like we don't think we're better. But it's like the fact is your tone and everything kind of makes it seem like you think you're better. But I guess it's almost like basically it's like people don't remember what this country is built over. Oh, you mean all like the murder and slavery that this country is built on? Yeah. I guess people kind of have forgotten on or something. I don't know. It's just his perspective of just kind of forgetting like, oh, it's like, oh, people have forgotten the legacy that built this country. I think kind of insinuating white men built this country. So it's kind of like, you know, show some respect type of situation. It's interesting. It's interesting that conversation comes up because we know ladies are a part of the cavalry as well, so I'm like wondering what does that mean you speaking that to Lori in the grand scheme of things. But nevertheless, but then we kind of find out the moment the portal's there and everything, I'm like, what is this all about? Because it's like, oh, being president, he's like, nah, that's too small, because that's what Jane had said. And I was like, what does that mean? And I was like, it's like we're gonna change all of this. I'm like, what? I was like, wait, does that have something to do with Dr. Manhattan? Are you gonna use I was like, oh my God, this is about Dr. Manhattan. Because like the portal, well, you're planning on going to Mars, because in their minds it's like, well, he's on Mars, so their plan is a base. And it's so interesting. Well, I'm circling all over the place, but I do apologize. I did like learning that basically their plan is to take Dr. Manhattan, kill him, take his powers and give it to them, the 7th Cavalry becoming the new Dr. Manhattans. That's super interesting. Like, huh? So the last thing you want are a whole bunch of white nationalists with godlike powers. Yikes. That's like giving superpower. Essentially, that's like giving I think the equivalency is giving superpowers to Nazis. That's nuts. Okay, so there's that. Then we get the whole Angela thing, and obviously Lady True. And I like that little thing back and forth of like Angela, you know, it was like, I even love that thing that Lady True injects her with. It's like, okay, I'm tired of having to explain this over and over again. And she injects her with what is essentially a commercial explaining like, hey, you're overdosing on nostalgia, and this is what's happening inside of your brain. It's like, oh, but this is a treatment, and it's like it was a legitimate commercial that was shoved in her head. I thought that was kind of interesting. Yeah, saying like, oh yeah, and like the person that's, you know, she's connected to is her own grandfather, so it's like, okay, so that's a situation of like them being, I guess, you know, related and everything makes the process of the cure or whatever, you know, apply to her. Which is a whole thing of like, okay, your grandfather wanted you to take the pills, but he didn't expect you to take them all at once. That would be kind of a slow process, which is interesting because that ties into the BN situation. Because I didn't even correlate that with the whole thing, like the whole nightmare she had about 100-year-old woman and everything. It didn't click in my head, even when, like, you know, she was talking to Angela about it and stuff like that. But then Angela brings it up to Lady True. It's like, so whose memories of your daughters? And she's like, what? It's like, yeah, the way she's talking about the nightmares of, like, you know, being an old lady and everything. I was like, oh my God. I was like, Lady True's got her own daughter on nostalgia. Oh, actually, that's not her daughter. That's actually her mother. She brought back from the dead, basically kind of cloned into a little girl. And kind of, she wants her mom there for her, for her to be there to kind of congratulate her and be there for this monumentous moment and stuff like that. But then there's a whole conversation about her dad where it's like, what about your dad? And he's like, oh, he'll be here something. I'm like, okay, what is that setting up? Because they went out of their way not to explain who her dad is. So it seems like not unless it's going to be a twist where it turns out her mom is someone we know. Maybe her dad's going to end up being someone we know. Maybe that, I don't think it will, but I guess maybe there's always some possibility that maybe it ties into the Dr. Manhattan thing. I don't think it does, but you never know. It is interesting, kind of circling back, Angela meeting her grandmother, June. That's kind of a crazy situation, especially because June was like, it's like, oh, tell me some stuff about yourself. And it's like, oh, I want to be a cop. It's like, of course you do, because obviously in her mind, it makes her think back to Will, which when the conversation came up of like, oh, do I have a grandfather? She jumped over that conversation real quick. She stumbled a bit to get past that conversation, but she wasn't trying to have that conversation. What was interesting is we got a little insight into her relationship with her son, because for her, it's like, yeah, don't worry, your daddy, someone in a mask kind of scared him when he was younger. He just never quite got over it. So that's where, obviously his whole bias towards like people in masks kind of came from. But June's conversation I thought was interesting, where it's like she didn't want him to come to Vietnam all those years ago, but he did. Because I guess maybe on some level, even the whole being in uniform and everything, maybe on some level that's kind of following in his father's footsteps, in the sense of like, well, his dad was a police officer before suiting up to become a vigilante. So maybe it's certain aspects of that. Maybe it's not. Maybe for him it's like the badge meant more. Whereas like for Will, he felt like he could, and even June kind of thought like, hey, maybe you can do more with that hood than you can at badge. Maybe his son kind of thought the other way around, because it's like, no, a mask means you have something to hide. I have nothing to hide. I fight for what I believe in, and I'm going to show my face to do it. Maybe it's kind of like to spite his father a little bit. I don't know. It's something to think about, but they didn't talk for such a long time. She had a little scare with like a heart situation. Then she wanted to, it put things in perspective. And by the time she tried to write him a letter, he was already gone. He never put her down as like, family contact or whatever. It's almost like I didn't exist, which they kind of make the point to make you realize like, oh, a very similar thing to kind of how she handled the whole Will situation, so. And it's just like when she's about to take Angela to Tulsa, she dies of a heart attack, and it's just like, okay, that's interesting. Then, we also circle back to, Cal showing up, trying to talk to Angela, but no one's letting that happen. And then there's the whole situation of Angela finding out it's not her grandfather she's connected to, is in fact a giant elephant. And it's like, what the hell does that mean? Wait, so where the hell is Will during all of this? Because, oh, dude, there's just so much. Lady True talking about the fact is that she's trying to save the world, and her giant clock thing has something to do with that, which obviously Angela doesn't believe that. Like, oh, you're trying to save the world. I kind of think that's complete and utter BS and stuff like that. And then there's that map she found, and it's like all these different places. I was like, what is this all about? Every time she touches a different places, some stuff, and I was like, oh, it's those boots. And then she spun the map. I was like, you're going to land on Tulsa, aren't you? We're going to see Lori's, and lo and behold, her conversation to Dr. Manhattan. And I think in that moment, obviously what we kind of find out later on, I think a lot of those pieces kind of click together for Angela. But nevertheless, Lady True talks about the fact that this whole situation is actually something Will brought her into the fold about. The fact is coming together to stop this whole situation, because apparently, and I love this twist of apparently Dr. Manhattan's been on Earth this entire time. He's not on Mars, which begs the question, how long has he been on Earth? When did he come back? Why did he? Well, did he come back because of this particular? Well, it might be the thing of he knew that this is where he needed to be, where he was supposed to be. I don't know. You can never tell with the whole Dr. Manhattan situation, but I thought that was kind of fascinating. That it's oh, he's here on Earth. And obviously Angela's like, oh, that's such BS. It's so crazy. But the fact is, she's like, you didn't actually ask me who he is. What? you didn't ask me. I tell you that Dr. Manhattan's here on Earth. You didn't ask who. I'm like, wait. I started thinking in the back of my mind. I was like, oh, who could it be? Who could it be? I was like, I started thinking like, you don't think it's Looking Glass? I was like, no, it can't be Looking Glass. But then I was like, it can't be Cal, can it? Because I was thinking like his amnesia. Because that was the whole thing about like his little secret that he had amnesia. But I was like, why is that such a big secret? Why are you keeping that secret? I didn't understand that. And then Angela shows up at the place, the cavalry waiting outside. Do they know that that's who he is? Or are they just coming after Angela just because it's like, well, she's a loose end. It's like, well, she's free and everything. We got to take care of her. But it turns out everything about Cal is a lie. Because apparently it gets revealed that he's actually Dr. Manhattan. I'm like, it's like apparently the whole like pretending to be someone else was his idea or something, and it's like, oh, us together, which I'm like, man, I don't know what to make of that, because he bounces from one relationship to another. Obviously there was his relationship with his previous girlfriend, the one that, you know, I don't know if that's from the comic books, the whole like believing, well, because I think they reference him being kind of a cancer man, so I think that storyline is true to the comic books too, not just for the movies. Because once again, I do know that some, not everything, but a good chunk of Zack Snyder's version of the movie, like a lot of stuff got cut out from the graphic novel, but a lot of that is still kind of true to the comic book itself. Just like I said, there have been changes here and there, but I thought that was so interesting where it's like, okay, so it's just interesting because he went from her to, you know, Lori, which even Lori's trying to reach out to him, but now it's understandable why the messages were never getting to him, because he wasn't on Mars to receive them anyway. But that's just because for Lady True, she felt like, you know, he's not, well, she was like, the fact is people think that, you know, like, oh, they feel better knowing that Dr. Manhattan's out there listening even though he's not. What makes you wonder, is that why Will and Lady True invested so much time into Angelo? Is that another reason why Will is doing all this, because he believes that he knows about Angela's situation? Because it's like, oh, they already knew about Cal's situation, which even Angela was like, how the hell did he know? The guy spent 20 minutes with me, but it's like, I guess Will did his own research. We don't know what that necessarily entails. Like, who knows how long this whole thing has been in the works. So, regardless, Dr. Manhattan, dude, holy shit. I can't stress that enough. Like, that is quite the reveal. But knowing that him and Angela are together, but it makes me feel weird, because he kind of, you know, he doesn't care about humanity. He bounces from people to people. Like, you know, emotions isn't something that comes, you know, natural to him and everything, which begs the question, like, how did him and I mean, I guess it's kind of like, well, when the godlike being comes into your life, you kind of get seduced by it. You kind of feel special. Maybe that's kind of a lane they're going down. I don't know, but Angela is like, yo, we in some shit. I'm like, dude, this story took a turn I wasn't expecting. I'm like, what the hell is this about? Because obviously even the trailer hinted at the fact is we were going to see Dr. Manhattan. We just didn't know under what circumstances, but it's like, wow. And I'm leaving off another great part of this episode too. Freaking Adrian is on trial. Apparently he's been on trial for a year, because they're like, yeah, 365 of the trial, and the prosecutors finally get to their closing arguments. I even love the prosecutor went in on the fact of the matter is, it's like our creator gave us, you know, birthed us and made us, gave us this paradise, but had one rule: never to leave. And we see that every attempt he's ever made, Adrian has tried to leave. We're talking about the man that killed his own comrades, created a psychic squid that killed millions of people, you know, a little bit of genocide, you know, and then also the fact is he's been using and killing them as well. And it's like, he's super guilty, and apparently Adrian's representing himself, and it's like, all right, so what's, you know, oh, you're defending yourself, so what's your defense? And he rips one, and it's like, that was it. And I'm like, okay, because even I was like, oh yeah, he's definitely not apologetic, because in his own twisted mind, he thinks everything he did with the psychic squid was the right thing. It's like, oh, I'm the hero. I saved the day. I stopped the nuclear war and everything. So it's like, okay. But then you see that moment when they find him guilty, and there's pigs that are determining it, because for them it's like, well, because Adrian is on such a different wavelength, because I think because of how smart he is, and the clones aren't necessarily up to that par, so he has to be judged by his own peers, which, you know, I think they were saying, I think like pigs are known for being super smart, so maybe that's what that's supposed to represent. But then everyone's calling him guilty. There's no clones on his side, at least maybe the clones that were on his side just aren't there at the trial. I don't know. But the whole thing, I just don't know what to make of it, because Adrian's crying at the end. Or is it just because he knows that this is all a farce? Once again, we still don't 100% know. Like, everything's set up to make it seem like, oh, the creator, the only like super powerful being like that is Dr. Manhattan, to be able to clone people and set up a system like that, kind of making them a paradise and stuff like that. But it's like, for what purpose? Why is Adrian here? Is this eventually going to tie into everything that's going down on Earth? There are just so many angles moving, which also makes me wonder, is that actually going to be the twist where instead of them getting to Dr. Manhattan on Mars, they accidentally open a portal to Adrian, so that ends up connecting the 7th Cavalry to Adrian? Or maybe that's their plan. Maybe their plan isn't necessarily to go after Dr. Manhattan directly. Their plan is to bust Adrian out of the prison he's in, because if they make a teleport, it can teleport him there, get him out of that hell prison, and then use him as a means to get after... Well, because the Cavalry is one of the few groups who know the truth about Adrian and the Psychic Squid, so maybe there's something there. It's like, well, the only person that can go up against a god like that is someone with a mind like no one else on this planet. Dude, I don't know. I legitimately don't know. I'm throwing out my thoughts about it and all, but I'm so excited to see where the hell all of this is going to be taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.